Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a 19th century American poet who grew up in Portland. He grew up in a large family, and everyone around him saw him to have a very lively imagination. He started writing poems when he was just 13, and unlike most kids, he loved literature more than sports. This led him to writing several poems throughout his life about war, love, and death. He was eventually seen as America's most beloved 19th century poet. The rainy day. The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains and the wind is never weary. The vine still clings to the moldering wall, but at every gust the dead leaves fall, and the day is dark and dreary. My life is cold and dark and dreary. It rains and the wind is never weary. My thoughts still cling to the moldering past, but the hopes of youth fall thick in the blast, and the day is dark and dreary. Be still, sad heart, and cease repining. Behind the clouds is the sun still shining. Thy fate is the common fate of all. Into each life some rain must fall. Some days must be dark and dreary. Longfellow writes The Rainy Day, reflecting on his lost youth, and with that, the death of his true love and kid. He talks about how everyone has these depressing days, or sorrowful moments in their life, when they don't know what to do, when the rain never seems to stop and everything is gloomy. But he also tries to teach us that behind these struggles, that there's hope, that after the rain, the sun will come out in the clouds and you'll be happy once again. The tone of the poem is gloomy and dark, but at the end it turns to hopeful. This is because Longfellow realizes that everyone has to have these kinds of days and learn to move on. I connected with this poem in particular because it made me reflect on times when I was depressed and alone. I would think about getting older or never having fun again. I would also think about the loved ones I had lost or would soon lose. I also connected with this poem because it reminded me that, like Longfellow, you have to learn to change the pessimism you feel into optimism. Line 14 says, "Into each life some rain must fall." This reminds us that everyone has these days and that you aren't alone. That is an important part of life you must learn to deal with. Without these hard days, you would take for granted the good days you have and the sunshine that is still there behind all the clouds. The poem also makes me realize how blessed I am because there are thousands of others struggling much more than myself. I also really enjoyed this poem because of how short and simple it was. I was actually able to understand it, and that made it enjoyable and fun to read almost. Like every poet, there are certain techniques Longfellow used to create The Rainy Day. Longfellow's main devices used in The Rainy Day were tone, imagery, and repetition. He started by using a cold and gloomy tone, but it eventually turned into hopeful. His word choice, along with the detailed imagery, made the reader feel present in the poem and made them feel emotionally attached. Also, Longfellow repeats many of the words several times to emphasize their significance in his poem.
Ow, don't bite me.